I am a massive sports fan. I will watch anything from hockey to tennis to basketball to curling. I just love when two people or teams are at the absolute top of their games and are giving it all their heart and emotion in competition to win. Even as an 800-pound Taco Bell savant, I can appreciate the skill and determination that athletes at the top of their sport have in their craft. However, in all of my time watching sports of all varieties, I have noticed one thing in particular with American sports that severely hampers my enjoyment and that I believe is detrimental to the health of the sports and leagues in the US. This being the absolute obsession that US sports have with offense at the expense of all other aspects of the game. And again, I want to reiterate that I've never actually played a sport in my life because of my crippling and debilitating chronic disease that plagues me through zero fault of my own. I didn't ask to be 800 pounds, I was chosen. And docs said I have bad knees and ankles. But even in spite of this, I can tell the obsession with offense is hurting the leagues. I don't know if this perception stems from sports leagues thinking American sports fans are just mouth-breathing Neanderthals who will start drooling all over themselves and banging their TVs with rocks if there's a pause of more than 5 seconds into scoring, or from the fact that American sports fans are just mouth-breathing Neanderthals who will start drooling all over themselves and banging their TVs with rocks if there's a pause of more than 5 seconds into scoring. But however you slice it, this theory exists and every American sports league subscribes to it. Now for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be primarily focusing on the 4 major sports leagues in the US, so the NHL, NFL, MLB, and especially the NBA. In the 4 major American sports leagues, there always exists a balance between offense and defense, but the issue is that these leagues' idea of balance is that defense is told to kick rocks and everything is sacrificed at the altar of offense. Every time the balance of the league starts to shift slightly in favor of defense, the leagues lose their fucking minds and immediately start talking about sweeping rule changes to handicap defenses even further and to artificially boost offense. You can see this over and over again in the 4 major sports leagues. So first, let's look at the NHL. The NHL saw a dip in scoring in the mid-2010s, which crescendoed in 2014-15 with Jamie Benn winning the Art Ross Trophy as the league's highest scorer with 87 points in 82 games, and saw the biggest sin of all, Carey Price, a goalie, win the MVP. To put this in perspective for you ESPN watchers out there, the 2022-23 NHL season saw Connor McDavid lead the league with 153 points in 82 games, and there were 20 players with 87 or more points that year. So immediately after what the league saw as an absolute catastrophe in 2014-15, they started clamoring and crying for a change. In particular, they started floating around the idea of decreasing the size of goalie pads, and after the 2015-16 NHL season, they got their wish and it was announced that changes were in fact coming to goalie pads. Starting in the 2017-18 season, the league implemented changes to the goalie leg pads and pants, and then prior to the 2018-19 NHL season, they further implemented changes to the goalie chest protector and shoulder pads. As a result of this, the 2017-18 season saw goals jump from 2.67, 2.66, 2.67, 2.65, and 2.66 in the previous 5 seasons to 2.73, and the 2018-19 season saw a further jump to 2.93 goals per game. It is worth noting that the initial goalie pad changes implemented in 2017-18 were not done until midway through the season, but even despite that, the goals still went up by 0.06 from the previous season. There were of course other factors that contributed to the rise in scoring that has taken place since the dip in the mid-2010s, but this whole reaction and quick response demonstrates the true power dynamic between offense and defense in the NHL. As soon as things started to shift a little bit more towards the defense, the league flipped out and implemented sweeping rule changes. In the MLB, the same can be seen. For the last 2 decades, the MLB has desperately tried to replicate the high-powered home run hitting of the steroid era of the late 90s and early 2000s. The most egregious example of this is with the juice balls. Starting in 2015 and further compounded in 2016, the MLB started changing the manufacturing process of baseballs to make them spun tighter and have lower seams to increase home runs, in an attempt to boost TV ratings. 2019 and 17 saw the most home runs in a season in MLB history. But this isn't the only example. Other changes implemented that also show this mindset of offense above all to be a real phenomenon are the implementation of the universal designated hitter and the removal of the shift for the 2023 season. For football, the changes are quite clear and obvious. You guys see what I did there? The NFL protects the quarterback to such a degree while simultaneously treating other positions like they're cheating ex-wives. Honestly, offense in general is protected and can't be touched, whereas defensive players could literally be stabbed on the field and no one would give a shit. Offensive pass interference might as well be removed from the game at this point because they don't call it anyways. But if you touch a receiver, you better start learning Chinese, buddy, because you're out of the league. This shows once again that the league prioritizes offense above all else. So this finally brings us to basketball, and where do I even start with this one? Basketball is by far the clearest example of this cult of offense mentality that exists in today's sports leagues. The NBA blatantly doesn't call travels or carries, they have a defensive 3-second violation to limit teams from playing zone defense, and it's worth noting that this is the only league in the world at any level that has this rule. They allow such little physicality, and any contact, whether initiated by a defensive player or not, always results in a defensive penalty. They let players shooting threes jump into the defensive player to draw penalties, and they are consistently rewarded for it. Now the league did finally address this, but the fact that it took as long as it did is ridiculous. So, unless you're stupid, I would hope now you would see that this phenomenon exists and the leagues have successfully altered the rules to increase scoring in recent history. All of the above examples across the 4 major sports leagues are emblematic of the prevailing belief in American sports that scoring is exciting. Now, while I will never argue that we should be attempting to actively make sports less exciting and more boring, what I will argue is that scoring does not inherently equal exciting, and that by actively working to artificially increase scoring by bending the rules and officiating to benefit scorers, leagues have actually made the sports more boring. I know, controversial, but hear me out. I stopped eating my hot dogs to talk about this, so you know I mean it, and that's on my government name. When scoring is easy, it's not exciting, it's a given. The easier scoring is, the less exciting it is. Think of a basketball 2-pointer versus a home run in baseball. Which is more exciting on its own? The home run in baseball, of course, because it is harder and rarer. The difficulty and rarity add to the excitement of the scoring. When you remove those aspects through rule changes and officiating or other tampering, I'm looking at you, Manfred, it artificially increases the scoring rate and dilutes it and makes it less exciting as a consequence. Home run derbies have a lot of home runs. Instead of baseball games, should we just have a home run derby? Of course not. Despite there being more home runs in baseball than ever before, each is individually less exciting because it's a result of juice balls and artificially reduced difficulty. Scoring is exciting and impressive when it is difficult, not when it's free. Now, scoring can be common and still be exciting, but it has to be when a player does it against top opposition. When a player is so good that they are scoring at will despite the other team doing everything in the world to stop them, that is exciting and jaw-dropping. When a player is scoring at will because the defenders are severely handcuffed and the rules are rigged to boost the offensive player's stats, that is not exciting. Think of Steph Curry's crazy 3-pointer in the Olympics gold medal game. What made that so exciting? It was of course the stage of the game and the point in the match, but also the fact that he was double-teamed and jumping away from the basket from deep and having to shoot over 2 players. Had he had all day to shoot an open corner 3, would the play have been as legendary? Or fuck that example, I got a better one. Imagine instead of hitting that shot, you drew a defender on him from beyond the 3-point arc and then jumped into him to draw a foul and shot 3 free throws. Would that have been more or just as exciting? Of course not. They were both 3 points, both of them were scoring, why was one more exciting than the other? By allowing players to play effective defense and not giving scores artificial boosts, such as the juice balls in baseball or not calling travels in the NBA, it allows for plays like that shot by Steph Curry. True, legendary plays. These leagues I'm discussing are still unquestionably the top leagues with the top players in the world. They do not need any further advantages. And people who think the players in these leagues are not good defenders or pitchers are crazy. They are the absolute best. They just aren't allowed to play their role optimally because the offensive players are given unfair advantages. Leagues today live for stat lines, not true quality of play. Look at the NBA. It lives for people on social media seeing a screenshot from ESPN of Devin Booker's 70 points, ignoring all context of the 24 free throws made in a farce of a 130 to 120 scoreline. When I see stat lines like that, I'm just not even impressed. It's more cringe to me, because it is such an absurd line, and I know the player was just chucking up 100 shots against defenders who aren't allowed to touch them and shooting insane amounts of free throws. I just know that if these teams are allowed to play defense and the refs didn't call every foul in the defense, the stat line wouldn't exist. Again, these players are the best scorers in the world. They don't need even more advantages. They don't need the ability to take extra steps and carry the ball and get the benefit of every whistle. But the NBA wants those crazy stat lines. Look at Olympic stats. NBA players at the Olympics are incredible players and by far the best in the world, but they average lower points per game when at the Olympics, even when adjusted for the 40-minute game versus 48-minute game. Now, there are other reasons for why guys average less, such as different or limited roles, but the point still stands. Now, addressing a quick counterpoint, specifically about the NBA, I've heard people say that calling traveling and carries more tightly would disrupt the flow of the game because of increased whistles. My response to that is that players will take the space they're given, meaning if they are allowed to take extra steps, they will. But if they start getting consistently called for it, they will adapt and the whistles will go back to the same rate as they were before. And if they can't adapt, then they shouldn't be in the NBA. Top leagues should be about scorers scoring with the strictest rules and the purest form of play. The fact that for many top leagues, the rules are enforced less strictly, and top players are given even more advantages on offense, is insanity. Players who need the least advantages are given the most. MLB balls with the hottest baseballs across any level. Think of that. The biggest, strongest players with the best hand-eye coordination and the fastest bat speeds are playing with the most juice balls. How does that make any sense? Nobody gave me any advantage when I was attempting to break the CC's Pizza 12x12x12 world record. Why should these guys get it? What, they think they're better than me? These changes also remove a certain level of tactics from the game. The zone in basketball is severely handicapped. In baseball, having to do with your pitcher batting offered a certain amount of coaching that was needed. Same with the shift. The shift was a clever and analytically based defensive scheme. It was creative and posed questions to offenses that they needed to address. But instead of having them address it, they just hit the eject button and changed the rules. And the result is a less interesting game. And with these rules and offensive obsession, the leagues bail out one-dimensional players who wouldn't be able to score against actual tough opposition. The players in the top league should be the ones who can score against any opposition because their offensive talent is just that high. not one-dimensional players who get bailed out by offensively biased rules. For example, the shift in baseball. I am sorry, but if you are in the MLB and you can't hit to the opposite side of the field, then you are a one-dimensional hitter and don't deserve to be bailed out. I'm looking at you, Matt Carpenter. It is absolutely ludicrous that the league comprised of the best players in the world had to bail out their players like this. And it hurts the development of the game too. These guys are the best and they would have adapted. Additionally, the younger generation would start learning to hit to both sides of the field and the result would be better, more offensively talented and complete baseball players. But the leagues couldn't handle this dip in offense, of course they took the easy way out and just banned it. Why don't they just ban defense at this point? Make it illegal to have any players on the field. Scoring would be so high, it would be so exciting. I think this is actually a great idea. Let's just get rid of goalies in ice hockey while we're at it too. Have the players shoot at empty nets. Players would score 1,000 goals in a season. Man, those stat lines would be so sick. Such legendary players to score 1,000 goals in a season. This is why it is idiotic to me whenever people talk about how good players are because of their scoring stats alone. You need to adjust it for inflation. Much of the scoring is artificial. Baseball is the best example of this. Home runs spiked insanely over a 3-year period. Total home runs in 2014 were 4,186, and in 2017 they were 6,105, a nearly 2,000 home run increase in a span of just 3 years. The league composition was probably 95% the same. So the exact same players were all of a sudden doing 69% better, at least in regard to home runs. Wow, they must have all just gotten so much better. By the logic that people use when comparing scoring of a modern player to an older player, this must be true. But in actuality, the players hadn't gotten 69% better. They're just playing on baby mode because the league thinks we're all a bunch of mouth breathers who just want to see pucks go in net or balls in baskets. Again, I want to point to Olympic basketball stats. Guys consistently average less there because the rules make scoring a bit more challenging. So, if the NBA had similarly strict offensive rules, you would see the same dip in scoring, and all of a sudden guys wouldn't look so legendarily good with their scoring stats. Well, what happened? Did they get worse? Or is it almost like rules have an impact on scoring? The reason that scoring in the NBA in the early 2000s was lower wasn't because guys were just way worse. It was a more defensive league. Scoring was hard, they called the game looser, and it was more physical. Now, I do want to make it clear that I think players do get better over time, and that modern NBA, MLB, NHL, and NFL players are all among the most gifted offensive players of all time, but this artificially boosted scoring is not evidence of that fact. And the fact that these guys are so good, yet being pampered with these rules is even more frustrating to me. If my blood pressure wasn't 200 over 130, I'd keep going, but Doc said it's not good for my health to get worked up like this, and I'm at risk of a massive heart attack. I also want to be clear that I do not think that offense is bad or that being offensively minded is bad. The issue I have is that leagues believe that being offensively minded means eliminating defense. In my opinion, the league should allow for both styles of play. Think tennis. Federer was an offensive player and Murray was a defensive player. Both were viable options, and one wasn't at the expense of the other. Offensive players had to adapt to defensive players and vice versa. That is a true balance. And I do believe that defenses should have limitations. Players in basketball shouldn't be able to tackle offensive players or grab their arms. But as it stands, offenses are at every advantage and defenses are at every disadvantage. Additionally, I am not against the league implementing rules to boost offense or defense to restore an equilibrium if one side is at too much of an advantage. The issue I have is that leagues currently believe that balance is 100% offense and 0% defense. And as soon as things shift to 99% offense and 1% defense, they lose their minds and create a rule to restore the balance. And what this results in is just... Oh, hang on 1 second, guys. My DoorDash is here. 1 second, I'll be back. Hey, Enrique? Okay, perfect. I see you got my order. Yeah, just let me double check this real... Wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. Where are the rest of my McChickens? No. I said I want 18 McChickens, Enrique. 18. How many do you see here? I said how many? 17. Yeah, that's right. Oh, so you can count. So they didn't teach you that in Venezuela. Because apparently you can't understand simple mathematics. 16, 17, 18. Enrique, I swear to God! Do you want me to get you reported ice? Is that what you want? In all my previous video analysis, I offered a remedy, so I'll do the same here. And it's simple. Just let defenses play. For the MLB, they need to cut this juice ball shit and just let teams use the shift again. For the NHL, I honestly don't hate where things are at right now. I believe it has the best product of any of the 4 major sports leagues. I wouldn't hate seeing the goalie pads go back to where they were before, but I'm honestly fine with how things are now. Just don't change anything further. Football, they need to stop babying the offensive players and let them be a bit more physical on defense and stop calling the soft DPIs and holdings and roughing the passer. There's obviously a very serious and real injury risk in football, so some of these changes are for protection, but it's gone beyond that in my opinion. And finally, basketball. This is the longest one. Remove the defensive 3-second violation and let the teams fully play zone, start calling and enforcing travels and carries, call offensive fouls when the offensive player initiates the contact, and call last fouls in general. Let teams be physical and play. With these changes implemented across the leagues, I really do believe we would see a higher quality product on the floor. Now, this is certainly not the only issue with American sports, but it is a big one that I believe isn't talked about enough. I believe American sports are the best, but they can always be better. Now, I have some absolutely wild and more radical ideas about changing leagues as well, such as cutting playoff teams in half at the least, and cutting regular season games in half, so if you want to hear me rant about those, let me know in the comments. But for now, take it easy and I'll catch you in the next one.